That's why I asked Kyle to come talk to this group today, to share with us what he sees at the national level as part of the organizations that he works with, and to give us some insight on what he thinks the future in Colorado looks like as far as our mission as a DOT. So without further ado, I give you the Ayatollah of Maintenance-ola, Mr. Kyle Lester.
Well, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Great to be a little bit outside of Denver. I'll say, looking at those pictures on the YouTube video, kind of makes me a little sad because I moved to Colorado in 1999 and lived in the Southwest. So a lot of those spots you see on that video, those are places that I've been. That was kind of home. Southwest is kind of high plains, but you get quickly right into the mountains with Telluride, Durango. The San Juans are one of the most beautiful places you can see in Colorado. So it makes me sad that I'm living in Denver, quite honestly. But hopefully you guys get a chance to get out and go see some great tech tours going up to Pikes Peak. It's kind of a cool place. And just being out of Denver into Colorado Springs, this is a nice venue, so welcome. One thing I did want to tell everybody here, congratulations, 50 years for WSHEMA. Everybody here should be very proud of keeping this group together. We all know how hard sometimes keeping groups together, right? There's a lot of enthusiasm. You pick, when you get started, you pick kind of a couple of key initiatives that you want to move on, kind of accomplish that, and then things kind of lull, right? So it's impressive that this group has stayed together for 50 years. And I wanted to speak to kind of the partnerships of how important this group is, right? And I think particularly in equipment, right? There's only very few equipment manufacturers in the country, right? Or in the world. We're all kind of buying from the same manufacturers usually, dealing with the same issues, same challenges. And so it's a natural collaboration amongst state DOTs and locals when they tack on to us to come together in groups like this to talk about specifications, what's best for the whole industry, trying to standardize and help each other across all the states, especially the West. So I applaud you for all those efforts and appreciate you guys keeping this going, because I know we benefit greatly from borrowing, I won't say stealing, but borrowing a lot of your specifications, a lot of the expertise in this room, and how we can utilize that in Colorado. So I really appreciate and thank you for that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. Chris and I, Howard, some of the equipment managers you guys deal with in Colorado, we talk about some of our challenges that our DOT, Colorado, is dealing with. Be interested to hear your guys' thoughts on I'll just give the top 3 challenges that we're dealing with in the equipment world, just focused on that. So one, recruitment and retainage of employees. It's across the whole industry, especially in maintenance and operations. Recruitment and retainage of qualified, high-functioning employees is almost hitting a critical level, right? And, differences with CDLs, things like that, that's a challenge. But in particular, mechanics. And how do we find the best ways to recruit qualified mechanics? And once you recruit them, you got to keep them, right? I think that's one of our biggest challenges going forth, is how to increase pay, how to point to those things that I can make the argument to change the pay range for these type of employees, these skilled employees. That's one thing we've been looking at. I'm not pointing to we're successful in this yet, but it's probably number one challenge that I'm seeing for us, for Colorado going forward. Once you have them in the door, our second biggest challenge is training, right? Increasing training, and especially training, the evolving training with technology being rolled in, both diagnostic and overall with our equipment becoming kind of mobile work centers, mobile, ARWIS stations, that's rolling infrastructure in a sense. And as we move into autonomous vehicles or even connected vehicles, V2V technology, I think our equipment is going to become a critical infrastructure piece. It's already a critical infrastructure piece to keep the roads open, but even in the technology space and connected vehicles, I think it's a critical piece into that world. That's going to be the piece of equipment that's going to be distributing the data, right, to all the other vehicles around it. They talk about infrastructure being set in kind of permanent installations. Well, I don't believe that to be true. I think we're going to be pushing information to these vehicles as they're going down the road, and they're pushing the information out to the other vehicles. So how do we train people to deal with all the technology that's coming on? How to handle the electronic systems on vehicles? So training is a critical component and critical challenge that we have to figure a path forward. Some of the things, when we were in, many of us, right, we're all in Grand Rapids, and I talked about possibly associate's degree program, partnering with them. We built the maintenance management degree, associate's degree. We could quickly spin that to kind of pivot to equipment, an associate's degree for equipment. I'd also encourage, partnering with Clearroads and Aurora. I know we collaborate a bit, right? But being on those boards, those executive boards, I think we could do better. There's a lot of stuff. Maintenance managers come and say, well, we need some training. We need a study done to, find a better way to do this. And so the last one that, in the last meeting I was at, I kind of voiced we're leaving kind of the equipment guys out when we're speaking on their behalf. There was a study that Clearroad is putting on for training, and it was about electronics, how to help mechanics deal with electronics. And I'm like, we should really partner together to do that. And Chris, you kind of led some of these people to participate in that study. So I think better collaboration against all the different research groups will help. There's a number of different NCRP studies that you guys are leading, which I appreciate, because once they're done, in fact, there's a few that I've been hassling Chris about. Where's that study at? Because I want to implement right away. I think one of the biggest challenges is how do we implement research and then train our people? So back to the training. How do we take that research and implement it and teach our people to sustain that research? I think that's where we really need to focus. Third, right, the elephant in the room that we always talk about anytime we talk about especially heavy fleet is the efforts and the pressures that we all feel for zero emissions vehicles. Right? It's almost, some maintenance people are saying, don't bring that stuff here. We heard it in the superintendent's meeting last week. I had a traffic engineer superintendent's meeting from everybody around the state. And that was one of the things that was on their mind with our current governor pushing on zero emissions vehicles and pushing hard, putting out an executive order, mandating it. Everybody's pretty concerned in the maintenance world, maintenance and operations world, is how is it going to impact us? So I think many of us feel that challenge. And so that's probably a bigger, I won't say a risk or, it's just a challenge that we have to face. What CDOT's going to focus on? We've been working hard since Chris and I have been in these positions to reduce kind of order to in-service time. There's a couple key components. When we sat down, hired Chris, looking at how can we move the needle on equipment. We were at least 2 years out on order to in-service time. At one point there was 160 chassis sitting at Coyce Brothers, waiting on the Allied. They were going off warranty before we could even get them in service. We flooded the market. We went out and got a whole bunch of additional funding and didn't prep the market is kind of what happened. They couldn't deliver as fast as we got the money. So we're going to continue those efforts to reduce our in-service, order to in-service time. Ways we accomplish that was basically standardization. No longer can we have regional differences. A plow is a plow is a plow. And we push that on the regions. little bit of convincing, but a lot of directing, unfortunately. But I think once now in hindsight, years later, 3 years later, I think everyone's seeing it. You hear some things like, oh, I want this one thing, but one specialty thing for this purpose. But for the most part, standardization across the state is critical. Now we've built a somewhat more of a mobile workforce. Somebody that's working on the plains can go and work, can move on a patrol in the mountains, and it's the same truck. So they don't have to worry about equipment differences. All they have to worry about is, okay, I got roadway differences and operational differences. So I think that's pretty critical. Going forward, we're going to focus on reducing our costs. What efforts, partnering with industry to figure out where can we actually reduce costs. I don't have any answers on that one either. But I'm seeing that our funding we are struggling and fighting, scrapping for every piece, every dollar that we can get for equipment, and our costs continue to rise. And I wonder, what can we do to change that narrative? What suggestions does industry have to, what changes can we make? The other thing is right sizing the fleet. With the minimal dollars that we have, I know nobody on the operations side, maintenance side wants to talk about taking their vehicles away, taking their trucks away. But there comes a point when you have to right size the fleet. You got to make sure you have the right number of the right pieces of equipment. When I see, for Colorado, when I see the average snowstorm, we have about 970 plows, and the average snowstorm will have 420 is the highest number engaged. That means like half of our fleet's sitting on the sidelines. And when you look at the utilization's not there across the whole fleet. And that's a challenge. And trying to cultural challenges within the agency to try to get people to understand it's better to right size the fleet, turn it over faster, because we're not getting more money. Some of the things we're going to work on going forward, and actually not even going forward, some of the things that have helped with new money into it is our resale value of vehicles. So a preservation, I'm making some connections here, a better preservation program is one of the main efforts I want to push on for a couple different things. One, preservation, right, reducing downtime, more reliability on the fleet, but even make the secondary argument that if we maintain our equipment better, if we put a target, Chris and I set a target, we're trying to get all the plows out at 10 years into the surplus. Well, if I can get a 10-year-old plow that's still in great shape because we've done our preservation, we put a minimum bid on that, that's more revenue coming back in. It's just a revolving cycle of keeping our equipment going. Many states I know have done that and bring tremendous value back in, new money in a sense, back into their resale program, the surplus program. So that's one of the key things I want to work on going forward is the preservation of the equipment and set more prescriptive preservation treatments of the equipment. One of our bigger challenges is, the new technologies. AVL systems, I'd say, 4 years ago, CDOT went 100% all AVL. I wouldn't say we made all the right choices in that process. We had talk about me being a disruptive leader. I had a deputy executive director that was a very disruptive leader that said, I want that now. And I don't care about you going through a process to select. You better pick right and get it done right now. So Chris and I had a tall task to just make it happen within, that discussion was about August, if not early September, and he said it before winter. So we had a very quick transition and cultural changes within the agency to implement AVL. And probably many of you have experienced that, Big Brother watching, all the things that go along with AVL. I think we've overcome a lot of that now, and we're starting to realize a lot of the benefits of AVL, or I'm going to start terming it more connected vehicles, a connected plow. Because now we're turning this into being able to do work orders, your timesheet, your email, all right there in the plow, not while you're driving. I've gotten that question from a whole bunch of employees. Yes, you're supposed to pull over in a safe spot, not do your work orders or check your email while you're driving the truck. But we're using technologies to help kind of build that plow or that crew truck into a fully connected vehicle. We've bought tablets for every single maintenance employee in the state and finding ways to get them connectivity. The other benefits we're seeing from connected vehicles, better managing the fleet utilization. We're going to start diving into actual analysis of like route optimization using that technology to better perform our maintenance and operations work. Where are the vehicles actually going? Better diagnostics, right? For mechanics, we've seen connectivity going into the future. Diagnostics and remote dial into a truck and actually reset codes. That's all coming. Route optimization, I talked about that. We have an RFP out right now waiting for award where we actually will take some of the AVL information and actually figure out, combine that with historical weather patterns and treatment usage, all that information collected through AVL. And then figure out what is the most optimized route, what is the best utilization or number of plows and number of employees on the route. Fleet composition, the density of the fleet. Do we have the right, when I talk about utilization, do we have the right type of equipment and the right numbers in the right locations? I think maintenance overall, we kind of hang on. All senior foremen or all super area managers want to hang on to their equipment and have their backups to their backups. And probably rightfully so because no one's going to be caught with their pants down in the middle of a snowstorm when a piece of equipment goes down. So, but does every patrol need their own backups? Or can we upgrade everything and centrally locate backups at an area office, things like that, in an effort to right-size the fleet. And then all the operational capabilities, like I talked about with the connected snowplow idea, where the snowplow now is collecting data and eventually transmitting data out to the public. So we have a number of different devices on the plows now. Biggest one probably is friction sensors. We're working on the Vizsla pilot project with, who else, Idaho, building a friction sensor for the plows, right? We have friction, I think we have 53 friction sensors on supervisor trucks, kind of as probes, going around seeing conditions on the roadway, but now we're gonna move into the plows. And the dollar figures you're talking about for the devices, they're mobile RWIS stations. We pay that road watch. We pay what? That's like $1,500 or something, or $900, right, for just the road watch, the temperature. And this is a mobile RWIS station. You invest, $3,000, and you get the full mobile RWIS station on a snowplow. That's where I think that going forward, our snowplows and our crew trucks are going to be those mobile probes, sending in information and transmitting information. We have the Tacona, tomatoes, on all of our supervisor trucks, and we're seeing huge benefits there, especially with ice storms. Because any sort of icing event, because you're able to tell right away where you're losing friction, where you have friction, and it's declining. So supervisors are learning over the past couple winters, learning how to change their management practices to move vehicles around. I think we're going to enhance that once we get plows out there. I haven't seen the study or the pilot. There was a lot of discussion about where do you put the sensor. Obviously, reliability of the sensor. Where do you put it? Behind the plow? Behind treatment? I think that's all what they were working on and trying to build algorithms depending on where you place the plow or place the sensor on the plow. We went on Wolf Creek, right? That was the first one.
Well, I was just curious, so is it measuring temperature? And I'm just wondering the location on the front bumper, aren't you getting heat from the engine?
I think they mounted it far enough out on the right corner, on the outside corner that the engine temperature wasn't affecting it, or the radiator temperature wasn't affecting it at all.
The ones on the supervisor trucks, I mean, there's very reliable data that's coming through, plus camera images, the whole deal. Speaking of partnerships amongst different national groups, I sponsored a Clearroad study, I want to say 1603. I got like 5 of them, but one of them was friction sensors. I think we termed it all sorts of devices, but it mainly was friction sensors. We were looking at reliability of the data, durability of the device, and then setting a standard for the industry, like a scale of 0 to 1 is what we ended up recommending, and trying to push the industry to stick with that same standard. So when it says a 0.8, it's a 0.8 no matter what device you're using. So take a look at that. But that's where I think sometimes our two groups could partner. Speaking going forward, future things, right? Autonomous attenuator, right? That was one thing that we kind of, all of us in AASHTO, we were struggling with. Florida had this idea. The guy retired, and it sat on his desk, and nobody picked it up. So I found out about it. Pasco and I talked and said, who can lead this? And so I grabbed it, and we put out the autonomous attenuator. It's been a 2-year effort. We're about to buy our next 2. There's been many improvements to the attenuator. We want to move into mowing, sweeping, other activities, other operations. It's been a long haul, which I'm not necessarily overly patient. So it's been difficult to get there, but I see improvements. So opening up and trying to work with industry to come up with what are these future technologies and how can they benefit us. And I thank any of the states jumping onto that task force or the pool fund study, and then now purchasing an attenuator. Hopefully we're going to grow that, because the number one thing we cannot have, it just doesn't make sense that we have a person sitting in a vehicle that is meant to be crashed into. It just doesn't make sense to me. And if there's no better purpose for autonomous technology, it's that for me. Speaking of, I talked about zero emissions vehicles. It's the thing that scares us all, especially in heavy fleet. When I talk to superintendents, traffic engineers, they asked me last week asked Chris and I, about zero emissions and our governor's push to electrify the fleet. I would say, first, we got to be, as an industry, we got to be a little bit, especially state DOTs, be a little careful of our response. We do not want to come off as resistant. We should be open, because resistant, what I found, especially with the governor's office, is they're going to do it no matter what. So you can either be sitting at the table or you're going to be told exactly what to do. And so I took the approach with the governor's office that we agree, we want to electrify the fleet. They wanted to use CNG gas a couple years ago, and I didn't present an argument of no or hell no. I presented an argument of, okay, let's test it. Let's try it. And we went through kind of the first stages of how do we actually put the tanks on there on a truck, the infrastructure to fill up a CNG vehicle. We went down that path, and ultimately kind of said, that's maybe not the right thing. Now, with this Governor Polis, he's pushing hard on electrification of the fleet. So now we're going through those same processes. So I'm not saying no. I'm trying to pick on other things other than our essential pieces of equipment. So trying to find places like the bucket trucks, hydraulic over electric, right? That where we can make a movement, maybe sweepers, those other type of vehicles, and not presenting a hell no case scenario and resistance that's going to get us an executive order saying you shall. So we are going to quickly move into opportunities to electrify the fleet. And one day we will pilot probably an electric plow. But hopefully I can push that down the road, because we're so focused on improving and electrifying our sweepers, our bucket trucks, our whatever, those opportunities, our light fleet first before I get to, dipping a toe into our essential equipment. But I encourage you, when presented with that challenge, And many of you guys have already been presented with that challenge. Many states throughout the country are pushing in that direction. Try to think about not resisting, being a bit more open to it, and working through the process. At least that's my lessons learned from 2 governors here that have pushed us in certain directions. I wouldn't say I dragged my feet on some, but I maybe added a few steps in our process to make sure we were doing the right thing. Overall, I talked about preservation of the equipment as we need to reduce our breakdowns, keep our trucks on the road. That is a key focus going forward. Trying to find systems to analyze what is our true downtime. That's been a challenge. Because once we have the data, then we can analyze how many mechanics we need, what size of fleet. So that's been another challenge that we've been working on, is true analysis of what is our downtime. We use SAP in our work order system. Not the greatest for our purposes in fleet, but it's there. We need the support from senior management to put efforts into actually building analytical tools to help us push forward in the future. I welcome you guys to Colorado, especially to Colorado Springs and not Denver.
So you mentioned you have 900 plus dump trucks, and the utilization shows you only use maybe 500.
Yep.
So 400 plus dump trucks too many. How do you justify that? Are you using them in the summer more?
No, I can't. It's cultural change that, and there's valid reasons from a patrol level to an area level, maintenance section, the regions, that you look at back to our downtime, and I would really need to improve our downtime analysis and data so we can clearly understand that. Because you hear all sorts of, if you ask the regions, and there's some regions here, so help me with this, right? We have 20 trucks down. You hear all sorts of numbers of what their downtime is to try to justify that we need this large of a fleet. And I'm not trying to take anybody's trucks. I'm trying to right size the fleet so I can turn it over faster and get younger.
Well, I was just looking, even if you look at the funding you're spending on AVL on every one of those trucks and everything else, it just seems interesting. So on a lighter note, what does the Colorado emblem stand for? Why do you have 2?
So one is the standard one for, it's all agencies. Governor Hickenlooper changed our logo, and there were reasons why. It was trademark infringements. The Colorado logo, the C, was not trademarked. So especially when the marijuana industry started really kind of taking foothold, you started seeing that logo show up on all sorts of different products. And so he changed the logo, the emblem, to have a 2-part. One was state, and then every agency had their second part, okay? So a big changeover. We kind of went around the state. We were told no increase in costs, so it was kind of this slow changeover. Now you end up seeing, there's 3 logos out on trucks right now throughout the state. Now Governor Polis came in, and he wanted a new logo. Wanted basically representing all aspects of Colorado life, and so that's where the colors come into the C and the evergreen tree, and then every agency has their agency logo, so it says the CO too. So that was it's a much more colorful logo than we've previously had. We started in the 50s with the old standard, circle, state logo. Then the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, we had the square or the rectangle kind of. What's that?
Flag-looking logo.
Yeah. And then Governor Hickenlooper changed to the kind of this same concept, and now Governor Polis changed to the CO look. It creates some consternation with people about having multiple logos and us changing out like all our shirts and everything we have. But
So is your truck marked with the one on the right?
we haven't even done any of these yet. This is still too new. I'm excited for you guys for the next couple of days. I think Chris has some pretty cool tech tours for you guys to see. Enjoy it. Enjoy Colorado. And again, thank you for all the work you guys put in on this committee. out of all the committees that all of us are on, I kind of view this as one of the most high-functioning committees out there, so I appreciate all the work. So thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.